keyboard to the boardroom. This is the Business of Esports podcast.
The fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation.
I, prophet of esports, joined today by my friend and co-host William Collis.
Yeah, we got the book of esports out. It's a big deal.
So everyone knows me as the prophet and William as the professor.
They may call me the prophet, but in my life outside of the business of esports, I have worked on the investment side of the table for the better part of the last 2 decades. The single fastest growing area of gaming and esports is gambling. It's booming right now. You don't need to be a prophet like me to see that. However, as an investor, I've stayed away from gambling and betting companies because of the reputational risk and often shady nature of the companies involved. This was true until now. I've recently bought stock in a new public company called Esports Entertainment Group, or EEG, which is focused on esports and gambling. The big difference that changed my mind is that EEG is a public company, NASDAQ listed, and fully regulated, focused on esports betting. The regulatory and audit requirements of a public company are key in my mind to provide the needed transparency for players, bettors, and investors. I had an opportunity to host the CEO of EEG on this podcast a couple of months ago, and I was very impressed by his vision for the company. We've stayed in touch, and I'm delighted to announce that they've accepted to become a sponsor of the podcast. If you're a family office, institutional investor, or investor of any kind, really, Esports Entertainment Group, ticker symbol GAMBLE, GMBL, might be one of the best ways to get exposure to the esports betting space and gaming in general. Make sure to check them out at esportsentertainmentgroup.com. Having said that, I need to make sure to state that this is only my opinion. I'm not an investment advisor or selling stock in the company. Please make sure you do your own research and seek advice from a licensed professional if you're looking to invest in the field. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast. I am Paul Dewalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, William Collis. For those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all the 5-star ratings and reviews. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate you guys enjoying the content. We love making it. We love talking business and esports, William, don't we?
We absolutely do, Paul. And, more than anything, though, I have to say that this holiday season, there's been one particular element of the business of esports that I've loved, and I'd like to share it with you. Can I tell you what it is?
What is it?
My business of esports socks.
I was wondering. I was actually going to ask you if you got them because I was actually going to do this too, which is show the business of esports
socks. They're so good. They're
really nice.
Good. I'm legitimately, this isn't even me like shilling for our like good store. Although to be fair, I totally would do that. Hashtag Book of Esports, buy the Book of Esports, Amazon.com. Like these socks are amazing. Like amazing. Like
they
I wear them
really nice.
They've literally, first of all, they came out really nice. Second of all, the colors are awesome. They're like just business capable, like our business, like they're like just business okay while being fun. They're like I
would totally wear those to a business meeting or anything like cool socks that stand out are a trend.
I feel like it's like the cool consultant in the consultant group. That's what I feel. No, I'm serious. They're awesome. Like literally, they're awesome. So I had like, this is totally unmounted, but I've loved them. I've worn them every day since they arrived. So they're great.
I appreciate you saying that. Obviously, I was wondering if you got them because I knew I had sent them to you. And William bought like 10 pairs, which is crazy.
I bought them. So I didn't buy enough.
I could have just sent them to you. You know that.
I know. I'm giving them away to everybody. I gave them to like my dad for Christmas. Like I was That's like, cool. I'm into these socks. Yeah. Shameless self-promotion.
Shameless self promotion. But they are like it's. I feel like it's the. I like all the merch, obviously, right? All the business of
Yep.
esports merch, but the socks just came out so nice. Like they're to me, this is like almost timeless. I love the design. There's gamer stuff on it. There's business stuff on it. The colors are cool. I don't know. I remember the socks are the product I'm most proud of. I think I really love them.
Everyone I have given it to has laughed. They've been like, from the keyboard to the boardroom to the sock market. They've been like, it's gold. It's gold. I don't know what to tell you. It's gold.
I mean, I knew you of all people would appreciate the dad joke. Actually, as part of the, if I remember correctly, as part of the product creation process, I wanted to put something clever on the little hang tag, and I actually, what I did is I messaged William on Discord and I said, "Quick, William, I need a dad joke for socks." Knowing that he would probably have something, a pun or a dad joke at the ready that was sock related. I figured.
I don't think I didn't come up with this one though, did I? No, I didn't. This was you, right? Keyboard to boardroom to sock market. That's you.
In fact, this was one of our employees who came up with it. Believe it or not. Yeah, not me.
Well, good for. Well, I knew it was too clever to be me. Like I would be like, I'd be like, sock it to ya, ha ha ha. Like that would be like fun.
No, it was Jillian. She did a great job. She designed them as well. They came out fantastic. Highly recommend. William, you want to talk some esports and some business?
I think that's why people are here, not for a long form sock commercial. It's
the official last podcast episode of the year. We have, by the time you see this, you will also have probably seen our year-end episode. So make sure to listen to that if you haven't already. But we're going to do this like a normal episode. The official sort of end of year special episode is going to be separate. So stay tuned for that. But let's do a normal last episode of the year here, William. We've got a few news stories. It's not as news rich, obviously, this week because most people are on vacation. Mm-hmm. But let's talk business and esports here. This was an article from .esports. Mm-hmm. The headline was, the LCK led all esports leagues in 2020 with 136.6 million hours watched. The subheadline, Korea has always excited global fans with its star-studded League of Legends squads. I mean, the numbers are huge. I mean, this particular graph, for those of you who are listening to the podcast, I'm showing a graph here. The most watched esports tournaments in 2020. The top 4 are all League of Legends. Worlds 2020, then LCK Spring, then LCK Summer, then LEC Summer, and then number 5, is a PUBG Mobile tournament. But basically, the top 4 out of the 5 most watched esports tournaments in 2020 were all League of Legends. And Korea's LCK, if you combine the numbers here, because they had spots 2 and 3, had by far the most number of hours watched, 136 million hours watched. Are you surprised, William, at this sort of ranking here, at these numbers? Riot seems to be killing it on all fronts at the moment.
Oh, Riot is just rock star. I mean, you'd almost be hard pressed to say like Riot is esports, like reading, like seeing these numbers. True. It's pretty tough if you have the top 4 slots all being your property in a different form. It's pretty incredible. I actually, to be honest with you, it did surprise me, Paul. It didn't, right? Like, it did surprise me in the sense that I think there's so much focus on North American esports right now, right? And to a lesser extent, like European esports, but still a significant extent. And I think there is a real sense that esports has matured beyond Korea, right? Like the global market, like it just, like Korea was where it started, but like it's a global phenomenon now. And as a result of that, like the global markets are taking over. You know what I mean? Like, so just by virtue of Korea is a smaller market relative to other countries and population size and everything. So like other markets was naturally outgrow it. And I think what you're seeing here is the anchor that Korean esports still is for our ecosystem. I also think, interestingly enough, you are observing that trend I just described as well, because I do not think, and I think if anybody's listening, you're sorely mistaken, you believe this, like it's not just Korean viewers watching the Korean like League of Legends games, right? It's global viewership of a national tournament property, right? And I
Yep.
think that itself is also fascinating, right? Like it's pretty rare. Like I think in the United States, we're used to like other countries watching the NBA. It feels a little different though, and kind of a little more exciting that we're watching another country's national sport and obsessed with it. And that's really what's going on here. And I think it speaks to the power of League of Legends as a brand. I think it speaks to the international nature of gaming as a whole. And I think it speaks to kind of like the quality of play that still comes out of Korea. Because I think why the views are so high is because there's such talent in that league.
Yeah, this was interesting for me for a few reasons, right? One was the big takeaway for me was, Activision Blizzard, arguably the biggest game company on the planet, right? And it's hard to say because Riot's private, doesn't, there's no public market cap to compare to an Activision Blizzard, but Activision Blizzard, biggest gaming company on the planet, has made lots of efforts in the esports space, talks about it a lot, has invested millions of dollars in it. That they didn't crack the top 5 to me is somewhat telling, right? And then you have to go back to
the 5th place is PUBG Mobile, which granted is pretty impressive. The scale of PUBG Mobile is really massive.
But here's the question for you, William. Like, is Activision Blizzard not cracking these kinds of numbers and this kind of list because they're arguably more North American focused? Is that the issue? Is it the games that they're fielding that are the issue? Like, why is this so Riot dominated and fundamentally so Asia dominated? And then the third question is, can we trust the numbers coming out of Asia from an audience standpoint, right? Because there's been a lot of discussion around, are they real? Are they, are they juiced in some way? Are they, I won't say faked, but meaning like, are they increased in some way that doesn't truly represent what the audience is?
Well,
right? Can we trust those numbers?
Well, I don't think you can really trust any number in esports today 100%, right?
Okay, fair.
Like I think there's an element of smoke and mirrors in all the numbers, and so much of what happens in the space is publisher monitored and platform reported, and there's so many incentives to report large numbers for your platform or your game. But yeah, broadly, like, no, I think like if you're concerned about these numbers being inflated versus say other types of numbers that get circulated, I don't think there's any reason why these would be particularly worse. And I'm inclined to generally believe figures that are reported about Riot and their size and scale, because like they're just so successful. I think generally Riot has a strong reputation as a publisher. Also, I believe this data source is accrued by a third party, right? Although I'm assuming they did the third party accruing from publisher provided or platform provided data sources.
Where they took the numbers from, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that chart is from Esports Charts, but like that where they pulled the data from,
it's probably
not clear. Now, what they're saying is these numbers, what's interesting, don't include Chinese platforms.
Yeah.
So that gives me a bit more.
If you include Chinese platforms, it would be all Activision Blizzard properties. No, I'm kidding. But
So that should give you some confidence, probably, right? Because that's probably where most 100%.
Of the. Although the over-reporting isn't just a uniquely China-based problem. But no, I think you can trust it, and I think. Sorry, what was your second question? Remind me your second question.
Is it a game issue, right? That Activision Blizzard is just fielding the wrong games, doesn't have sort of the perfect esport that is League of Legends, right? Like, again, when you see the top 4 out of 5, the top 4 being League of Legends, that this is telling.
Yeah,
hard to say. The League is, as you said, League is esports today.
Yeah, League stands alone. The more I operate in the industry, the more just a lot of things that League does, other games can't copy. They just are in a class by themselves. I will point out that Activision Blizzard, the games mix is probably certainly a problem here. I mean, if Heroes of the Storm was still massively invested in by the publisher, I think we'd be seeing very different. You're laughing, and I'm glad you got that joke. Yeah. No, but seriously, like I do think there might be. I'm starting to wonder if there's something about genre, right? That the MOBA genre is uniquely suited to playing and watching in a way that, say, an FPS isn't, right? Like,
Yep.
it's just the top-down isometric view lets you see and understand the action more, right? Like, I think it's easier to learn techniques and to benefit as a consumer watching a MOBA, like, than it is to watch a shooter. Like, your aim doesn't really get better watching a shooter, but like, you might
It's true.
learn how to handle the laning phase a little bit better in a MOBA when you see how somebody clears a wave, right? Their order of abilities or something. So I think it's easier to learn. I think there's all sorts of structural reasons why MOBAs appear a little advantaged right now. So seriously, my Heroes of the Storm joke was a little true, because I do think there's structural reasons for that genre to do particularly well. At the same time, you know, I do think, to be fair, I do think some of these things cut against the Activision Blizzard properties a little bit. You know, I'm guessing the definition of tournament here cuts against them because they host more tournaments in sort of more, you know, bracketed or split up sections. So their numbers might be cut more, right? I think if it were total viewership by game, these guys would fare a lot better. I think that's also why you see something like PUBG breaking into the top when normally they shouldn't. I think it's, yes, it's a big game, but I think it's also there just weren't that many PUBG tournaments. So when they were watched, all the viewer base came to them, right? But yeah, I mean, like, the bottom line is, if you guys are going to take something away from this as a listener in 2020, it's League is still king. Nothing changed this year. It's been king since 2016, arguably since before that, and it's still king. You know, that's where we are.
League is still king. Riot's still king. Arguably, next year I would guess we may see Riot have all the top 5, right? If Valorant delivers on its promise, and I would argue there's definitely sort of wind behind their back in their sails there, you know, that we could see an all Riot list, frankly.
You could, particularly, and think about what they have in their pipeline, right? Imagine if Riot's MMO, you know, comes out in 3 years, and what the viewership numbers will look like for that. I mean, they seem to have a very strong slate of titles to back up the success of League. I think it's a very good year to be working at Riot Games.
The numbers are huge, and the potential for Riot is really exciting. I really like what they're doing these days, William. I'm not a huge Valorant fan personally, but I really like what they're doing on the esports front and on the game front in general.
It's hard for me because I'm not a big League person, right? I think I've been pretty open about that. But it's difficult not to like the results in market. You know what I mean? It's the classic example of, like, you know, you might prefer whole wheat bread, but most people don't, you know, like.
Agreed. And from an investor standpoint, being able to have that separation is important too, right? Like, just because I don't like the game doesn't mean I don't recognize the massive potential here. So
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Let's move on, William. Let's talk about console wars. This article caught my attention. It says it was from aurora.dawn.com, and the headline was "The Last of the Great Console Wars," and the subheadline was "Microsoft's new paradigm-shifting positioning strategy may redefine how the business of console gaming is conducted." And he brings up 5 points, basically, of why the console wars may be over. So the first one is, he says the stars are aligned. COVID has forced more people onto streaming services and things like that, and watching Twitch and that kind of thing. 2, the cloud's becoming a centerpiece. He talks about Xbox Game Pass. 3, taking the sting out of the price. That price points for hardware and software are all coming down quite massively, and in fact, you don't even need hardware to access Game Pass anymore. And 4, content central to the ecosystem. So their focus is not so much on the console hardware, it's on buying out game publishers and things like that. And 5, again, it's all sort of repetitive here, taking the console out of the console war, that most games for Xbox, for example, are available on PC, and through Game Pass can be played on your phone, on your PC, anywhere you want, really. So he thinks Microsoft's moving away from a console platform, and thus making this the last of the great console wars. Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, you know, I actually requested we do this article, and you know, I'll tell you why. I want to just give a high level response thing. Details. First of all, like, I feel like every time there's been a console war, this article has been written.
Okay, that's interesting.
Like, I just want to point, like, I think everyone has been like, oh, this is it. And it's always some variant of essentially what this article says, which is, one side is definitely won, and they've won so badly, all the other manufacturers will leave the market, right? And like, that's just not true, right? So if you believe that that Xbox S is just so definitively amazing that Sony is never going to produce a PlayStation 6, like, I mean, good on you, but like, we're obviously not in that world. I think the more interesting piece in this article is this idea that maybe consoles are sort of stopping to matter, right? Which is something that hasn't been expressed as much, or rather, the idea of generational gaps in consoles is starting to matter less and less. And I'll give you an example of sort of where this might be going, right? The iPhone. It is a huge deal when the new iPhone launches. If you are a major tech adopter and you're ultra hardcore, you have to have the newest iPhone because it's bigger screen, better camera, faster, blah, blah, blah. But for many, 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 many people, the vast majority, argue, of phone consumers, they're like, okay, cool, new iPhone, but my old phone still works. It still makes calls. It still runs all the apps in the App Store. It still takes pretty good photos. I can check my mail on it. The next time I need to get a new phone, I'll buy a more recent model, right? And that could be where consoles are going because of the ubiquity of Game Pass and, candidly, the massive amount of backwards compatibility. It will become more like a phone cycle thing where, yes, hardcore people will upgrade every year all the time, but this idea of a massive gulf between like SNES and N64, or, you know, PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 will go away. It will be more of gradual incremental hardware improvements and essentially Xbox S.2 and Xbox S.3. And I think there's some truth to that this is the first console war I've ever felt like where I didn't have to rush out and have the newest console right away. That's partly because of must-play titles and I think some of the delays. It's just partly because all the games work on everything. And it's also partly because home PCs are becoming so powerful that, you know, for many people already have a pretty decent computer, the need to have a console to access big titles is just not there anymore. So all of these trends, I think, speak to not the end of a console war, but the de-emphasis of it. It will be more of a leading edge war. And I do think that in that sense, we're coming to sort of the end of that cycle.
Do you think there's a scenario, though, where 2 years from now, 3 years from now, pick a time, 3 years from now, okay?
3 years from now, I like 3 years.
Sony announces PlayStation 6 and Microsoft does not have a competitive piece of hardware planned. That their view is, we don't need this. Anyone who wants to play Xbox games can go and, you know, get it on PC or play it through Xbox Game Pass on their phone. So we don't need a dedicated piece of hardware to compete just because Sony announced one.
I think it's unlikely. I think we're still going to see there still is a leading edge advantage to driving your next gen hardware. So I think you'll never see a world where there isn't a competitive response, right? I think the competitive response we talk about could look different. For example, Sony announces PlayStation 6 and Microsoft says exclusive new Bethesda title, you know, Mass Effect stars, you know, only on Xbox S this holiday season, 30% price cut, right?
Okay.
It's like a more of a, like, you know, like it's possible that the defense against next generation becomes great content on current generation and and aggressive price competition, right? I don't think that's likely.
That doesn't feel like an effective response to me.
Well, my point is, and sort of what I'm trying to make here is, if the old Xbox plays Mass Effect and the new Xbox plays Mass Effect, right? Like, why do you need the new one? Better graphics. It's the iPhone thing, better screen. So there is an important segment you need to market to them. People upgrade. It matters. But it won't be this generational divide like it is now, right? Or like it has been historically, I should say.
Yeah, my question was more like, will Microsoft put a stake in the ground and say, we are not going to put out a piece of hardware, even if Sony does?
You're never going to be in a world like that, because that's just not how these, you know, industries operate, right?
But then this article is wrong, right? Like, then you will always have console wars based on that statement, right?
Well, and that's what I'm
maybe not great console wars, but console wars nonetheless.
The console wars just won't matter as much, is the way to describe it. They're DM because they will become, rather than a sea change in technology being made mass available, because that's what they really were. It was like you were catching up on the next 4 years of amazing tech developments that were happening at a lightning pace, right? Literally, it was twice as powerful as the one you had before. The graphics were, infinite. Like you went from 2D to 3D. I mean, it was these massive moments that really made generations divided. Now to be like, okay, cool, this runs 4K at 60 FPS. This runs 4K at 50 FPS. Like, yes, 60 FPS, 4K feels smooth. Hardcore gamers will notice it. I would argue an average kid playing at home isn't going to know Crash Bandicoot is running 50 FPS, and that's what I mean. It'll start to feel like a softer generational divide. I also, I think again, in that world, I think it will become more and more less the console you're on and more the games that are on the console. And that's why I think you see Microsoft buying something like Bethesda, right? Because it's less like our console is the best, the most powerful, the strongest, and more our console has the best content that you have to play. And it used to be that the best and most strongest console by default had the best games because it was the technical sophistication mattered, right? They could do more. That's not the case anymore, right? It's not like PlayStation and N64 where it's just true that the PlayStation was technically more capable of, it was better at rendering polygons. Like, let's be honest. You know what I mean? Yes, I know Mario 64 is an amazing game. Don't be mean to me. You can have great games on weaker hardware, but by and large, I think I would be right in saying Sony won that console war. And I think they run it by and large on the fact that they had stronger hardware, which attracted better developers and talent because you could really do things on a PlayStation you couldn't do on an N64. That is not true anymore. The power dynamics have shifted back to away from the hardware as a gate to the content creators as a gate.
I think that's what was most surprising for me, though, William, about this current generation of console wars, which was it seemed to have been mostly fought on technology grounds, right? It was which one looks better at 4K, which one has more teraflops, what CPU and GPU is this one using versus that one, which SSD is faster. PlayStation was talking about 0 load times and things like that, right? Like a lot of it was fought on the technology front. You'd think they would have learned by now that content is what matters most in these cycles, because it seems to have been ignored in this cycle, right? Like there were basically no exclusives, even though both sides have great IP, right? And at launch, at least, no exclusives, which was weird. Sorry, go ahead.
There were some exclusives, like the Demon Souls remake was a PS5.
But there was nothing that felt like this is a must buy. I'm going to wait in line 3 days before. No question, there was a ton of hype around these consoles. I think mostly because of COVID and people just wanting to play games. Yeah. But it's not like, oh my God, I have to get this because I have to play XYZ. Right.
Yeah, and it is weird that the launch titles were, but I think it goes back to the point I'm making is so many of the launch titles are also playable on the older systems.
Yeah.
So many of the launch titles. It's the point I'm making about the generational divide is not a start. The same games run on both, right? And I think that's partly why there wasn't a need to have must-play titles on both, because all the big games this holiday season ran on everything, right? I also think, to be fair, there was a Cyberpunk effect here where everybody was so scared about launching against Cyberpunk that it made it harder to justify, like as a title, as a studio, putting your game up against Cyberpunk and what was perceived to be a behemoth, even with the benefits and payments of first-party exclusivity, just didn't make a lot of sense, right? Like there is a palpable lack of games that launched around the holiday season this year because of that title. I promise you, right?
William, before we move on to our last story here, I just want to say 2 words. One of the fastest growing, if not the single fastest growing area of gaming is esports betting, guys. I know you've heard me talk about it many times. Usually I've stayed away from that sector because of the shady nature of a lot of the businesses operating there. Esports Entertainment Group, a company called EEG, Esports Entertainment Group, they're a NASDAQ listed, fully regulated company. If I was to bet on anything in the esports betting space, on the esports entertainment space in general, this is definitely a company to take a look at. Their ticker symbol is GMBL, like gamble. We had the CEO on the podcast a couple of times. Very impressed by their vision, very impressed by the business. So if you're a family office, an investor, if you have a Robinhood account and you like to play the stock market, if you're looking at esports at all, highly recommend taking a look at Esports Entertainment Group, ticker symbol GMBL, and you can go check them out at esportsentertainmentgroup.com. Having said that, it's just my opinion. I'm not an investment advisor. I'm not selling stock in the company. Make sure you do your own research, get advice from a licensed professional if you're looking to invest at all. William, let's move on to a final story here. And this one is interesting because it's sort of, we're going to stay on sort of the streaming theme we talked about in the first segment here, which is Allied Esports discusses evolving esports landscape, streaming, and their partnership with Trovo. And what I like about this article is it's also a continuation of, call it the wars we see in the gaming industry, right? We talk about console wars. Trovo is the latest entrant in the streaming wars, and those platforms, Twitch and all those like YouTube. The fact that we're seeing a partnership with Allied Esports is interesting. I thought the quote from the article here was interesting, which says, in a short amount of time since its launch, Trovo has moved the needle and become a destination for aspiring content creators and their communities. That's what the CEO of Allied Esports said about Trovo. Are we going to see Trovo as a real contender, William? That's, I think, the bigger question here.
Well, this all goes back to do I think this is the life-changing announcement that I've sort of been waiting for, where Trovo goes to the big leagues?
No. This is not them signing like Ninja.
Yeah,
right?
This is not this is not like Mixer, although we saw where that ended up. But this is not like Dr. Disrespect, Shroud, Ninja, like the Boutiez sisters. Is those the people you like? The Boutiez sisters, it's not like that, right? Like where it's like, oh, everyone and love now on Trovo. But the point I'm making is it's a move, right?
Yeah.
And this is how things start, right? You don't this is a foray. It clearly shows some marketing spend by Trovo. It clearly shows, in terms of the language that's being communicated, how they are trying to suggest that they are viewed in the market as a credible competitor and as a welcoming content channel, right? Like something's happening there. Now, again, this could all be smoke and no fire, right? This could just be, a small micro play doing a little bit of local marketing, right? Or it could be, like a scouting foray for the main battle. And I'm inclined to believe in general that if it's not Trovo, it's something else. But what we're seeing now are the scouting forays, right? The things being snuck in at the end of the year under the radar to try in Q1 and Q2 that maybe we'll do. And I really do think, again, like I just caution our viewers, like the streaming war is not done, not even close. Watch all the platforms, Trovo most among them because of the Tencent connection. But watch them all, because Mixer bowing out has not meant the end of the platform for the distribution platforms on the internet, the battle for distribution platforms on the internet.
Yeah, look, I'm with you that this is not like a groundbreaking deal, right? No one, we're not going to be talking about this 2 years from now as some landmark thing that took place in the gaming and esports world. It's probably a very small deal, and Allied hasn't had the best year. Trovo is still a very, small player in the streaming space. And so it's like small player plus small player. We're not going to be talking about this forever. But where I do agree with you 100%, William, is it still says to the world, Twitch has not won, right? By no means is this game over. And I think a lot of people just assume Twitch has won because they are the biggest name in the streaming space. But what I like about this is it backs up a narrative that I think I've been pushing for a while as well, which is I think Twitch fundamentally is more exposed and more vulnerable than ever, right? I think they've made some missteps. I think from a decision-making front, some of these bans, some of the DMCA stuff, like they've made some missteps that have alienated some users. Fundamentally, there's not that many options out there. It's YouTube or them pretty much these days. So I like the idea of a Trovo coming in and trying to take some market share. And I think if they play it right, and I've always said where there's room right now, is a more hardcore gaming platform, right? More hardcore esports focused, more hardcore gaming, because Twitch has become just sort of this wasteland of like just chatting and dancing and art, and it's all great, right? It's all great, interesting content.
It's shifting, yeah.
But it has diluted sort of the gaming focus of the site. And that's where the opening is, right? Like if all you want is gaming and all you want is esports, I think there's probably room for a player out there. I don't know if that's Trovo's strategy, right? But I like this kind of deal because at least it reinforces the idea that Trovo is not just going to disappear tomorrow, that they're at least making some effort to make inroads in the space.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's well said. That's well said.
Allied themselves, I mean, yeah, the Allied view of this one is maybe a little less rosy, right? Because if I'm Allied, I probably would have wanted to deal with Twitch or YouTube, right? Like, because I'm the one putting on the tournament. Like,
I didn't even think about the other side of this. But you're right. Like, you know, you're like, this isn't the marquee deal that's gonna, you know, change the course of your business for all time. This isn't like the NFL's come knocking, and you know, but like, I mean, again, I mean, you could maybe have a counterpoint and say maybe Allied got paid well for this, right?
Maybe,
like, you know,
maybe, and they may need each other enough that both invest significant resources in this, and so it becomes a win. Whereas Twitch might have looked at this and said, "We don't care. Like, it's such small potatoes." So you know, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But I'm with you that I don't think the streaming wars are completely over, but I think it's going to take some smart people to sort of crack Twitch's dominance at the moment. There are opportunities, there are openings, but they're not going to be easy either.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. Is like, it's not, I mean, it's Twitch is, there will be a war. It's not like Twitch has lost it. You know, that's the easy way to say it. Like,
they haven't won.
They haven't won.
But they definitely haven't lost.
But they definitely haven't lost. And if I were going to bet, I may still bet on Twitch, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean there's not a war. And, you know, it goes to the point of like, you know, the war itself will change the landscape, right? Like, I go back to that, like the very act of competition, even if the status quo is preserved from that competition, will benefit consumers in esports.
Agree wholeheartedly, William. And on that note, that wraps up this episode of the podcast. It wraps up this year of podcasts for us. We are going to come back strong in the new year. Obviously, we also have some special New Year content, which I suggest you guys go listen to, like some year-end content and New Year content, which you should stay tuned for. But it's been a real pleasure, William, doing these podcasts every week all year. We're going to do the same next year. You're going to see more content from us. If you love the podcast, do a few things, guys. Go buy the book of Esports, because that's the foundation for all of this. William is the brains of this operation here, right? Yeah, you can. You should. Yeah. It is the best book in the esports world today, bar none.
Amazing.
It's
what my mom says.
Business, esports socks, some merch. Support the what we do here. We love you guys for it, and we appreciate you for it. But most of all, keep coming back. Keep listening to the podcast. Tell your friends about it. Leave those 5-star ratings and reviews. Come participate in the live stream. We love meeting people who listen to our content, watch our content regularly. William, thank you as always. Thank you for a great year of podcasts. Couldn't do this without you.
Thank you, Paul. I love doing this with you. So here's to 2021 together.
That's it.
Wow. Yeah.
We'll see you guys in 2021 with more Business of Esports podcasts. Take care.